It's Fight News Now Extra. I'm your host, John Pollock. Thank you for tuning in as we've got all of today's news to get to. John Ramdian and Robin Black will be in studio as we chat about another UFC fighter voicing his displeasure with pay, another fighter planning to drop weight, and there may be a light at the end of the tunnel for Quinton Jackson and getting to fight again. Quinton Jackson has had a busy week of teased retirements, drunk dialing, and the latest coming from the former light heavyweight champion is that a settlement with Viacom and Bellator could be near. Jackson informed his fans on his Twitch account that the UFC told Jackson if he settles with Bellator that UFC will not contest it in court. Jackson goes on to state that he is hopeful to fight on the New Year's Eve card in Japan if a settlement can be reached and Bellator is willing to lend Jackson to the upstart promotion, which would be airing on Spike TV. Bantamweight Michael McDonald burst into the UFC back in 2011 and went on a 5-2 run, including challenging then interim bantamweight champion Renan Barão in February of 2013. But since December of that year, we have not seen McDonald as he's been dealing with injuries and is now on the fence regarding what type of fights he is going to seek out at the current level he is being paid. McDonald spoke to Brett Okamoto at ESPN and stated that his show money against Barão was $15,000 and only made $17,000 for his last fight with Uriah Faber. It's unknown how many more fights are remaining on his UFC contract and what his next step is going to be. And finally, MMAfighting.com is reporting that Jessica Andrade is moving down in weight and will be moving to the 115-pound strawweight division in the UFC. The 24-year-old debuted in the UFC's bantamweight division in July of 2013 and has gone 4-3 since her debut, but is coming off a submission loss to Raquel Pennington at UFC 191 last month in Las Vegas. Here with John Ramdian and Robin Black to chat about all of today's news. Do any of you guys have a Twitch account?
Come on, what do you think?
You might be getting a phone call.
I doubt I'm getting any phone call.
Well, Quinton Jackson, if Scott Coker happens to have a Twitch account, maybe that can ease the burden here, this legal issue. It looks like we're moving towards a settlement here. I feel that Quinton Jackson is going to end up fighting for Bellator again. Do you guys concur?
Well, hopefully, if that happens, they can get things sorted out, and then everybody can say that this Jaydeep Singh fiasco is a farce and it's not really happening, that it's Quinton Jackson facing Fedor Emelianenko on New Year's Eve. Rampage says Fedor is one of his favorite fighters, and I think that's a fight that will intrigue the hardcore fans, the casual fans, and the Japanese
What's in it for
fans.
Fedor? He's being paid the same regardless.
I get that.
He's agreed to this opponent.
That's true. That's absolutely true.
Why?
Yeah, I understand 100%. But I think, who knows, if Rampage comes to the table and they're saying, hey, we're trying to make this fight because of the Jaydeep Singh fight, not a lot of people are interested. Instead of $2.5 million, maybe we'll give you $3.
It's a lot of ifs.
Sure,
the settlement has
ifs.
to be reached.
Yeah, of course.
Bellator has to be willing to put Quinton on this card instead of a Bellator card. A lot of ifs. I'm very suspicious that he's going to be fighting on New Year's Eve, but it could happen.
Yeah, it could happen. But again, this is a sport built on ifs.
So the last few days, I've been saying, this is really dumb. Nobody's going to be paying attention to any of this. This is ridiculous. But we've been pulled into this. And so have people online, so have people on Twitter, so have people that we're interacting with. They got our attention. Yeah. So you've got our attention now, so wow us. And I just have a feeling we're not going to get wowed in the end. It's fun to speculate, and that is part of what we love about sports and Game of Thrones and whatever you do. But in the end, you got to wow us. And would Rampage be a wow? Yeah, I think it would be a lot better. And that's we don't mean to insult Jaydeep Singh, man. Good for you if this is your fight. If you get $500,000 to go in there, go do it, brother. But I think, we'd like to have heard of.
True, but again, speculation. I think it's an important part of mixed martial arts because remember back in the day, Anderson Silva was ruling the 185-pound division with an iron fist in the UFC, but Strikeforce still had their show. Who was their middleweight champion? It was Luke Rockhold, and people would say, hey, I know if Luke Rockhold had his chance, he'd face off with the best fighters in the world. And everybody would say, no, those guys at Strikeforce, those guys at the WEC, they aren't as good as the guys in the UFC. And it was all speculation, but now we get to see what happens.
One day Gilbert Melendez did fight in the UFC. One day
true.
Eddie Alvarez did fight in the UFC. One day Anthony Pettis fought in the UFC.
And Anthony Pettis is going to be former WEC champion, is going to be taking on the former Bellator champion.
Good time. And that's even going to happen. Yeah. And then one day Luke Rockhold is going to be fighting for the title. But Fedor is probably never gonna. And that's the difference in this one.
Yeah, We've talked about it before. I mean, for Quinton Jackson, for short-term, long-term, does Bellator make a lot more sense for this guy? Do you feel that the UFC, I mean, the light heavyweight division, the UFC, yes, you have your top 4, but it's not exactly the deepest of divisions. There's still a lot of fights you can put together with Quinton Jackson, but I look over at the Bellator side. There's also a lot of fights you can make for Quinton over at Bellator, and I think the amount of money you can make in the short term at Bellator might exceed that than that of UFC. He's not going to have points on the pay-per-view in UFC, and I think over at Bellator, sponsorships and just the ability to make a lot more outside money is there for him.
Yeah, but I think Rampage and his team they've looked at all of those factors, but when you look at where can we make the most money, because we all know that that's Rampage's thing. The way that you can make the most money is to get yourself in a title situation or become a champion. And the only way to do that is to face the guys in the top of the 205-pound division in the UFC. Problem is, he's already faced Rashad. He's already faced John Jones. Will he be able to handle, he fought Ryan Bader, Teixeira, so exactly. So you look at the situation that Rampage has in front of him, does it make more sense for him to be here or to go over there? And I think it probably makes the most sense for him to stay with Bellator. But again, looking at the idea of making the most money, fighting for a UFC championship.
Sometimes you want to talk about reality, but you also don't want to break your rules of being negative about fighters. That's one of my rules. Sorry, Johnny Hendricks, I didn't mean to call you names. Please don't hurt me. But with Rampage, one of the realities is this guy is an entertainer.
Yeah.
And he's very much right now an entertainer. And that being an entertainer has a lot of value. That cool thing and hitting his chest and yelling and calling up Ariel, our buddy Ariel, while you're drunk on Twitch at 7 o'clock in the morning. Being drunk at 7 o'clock in the morning signifies maybe you don't train as much as you used to, and being an awesome entertainer has taken prevalence over being one of the greatest fighters in the world. That's the feeling you get. If that's the case, outside of Phil Davis, who you don't want to be messing with, I think Bellator is a safer place to go be an entertainer who still fights.
Sure, Tito Ortiz, Stephan Bonner, Fedor, I think those are all fights that you can sell.
Quick thing, Michael McDonald, he's not saying he's not going to fight again. He does, but he says he's going to be strategic with the fights he takes. Fighting Uriah Faber for $17,000 really doesn't do it for him. The devil's advocate to that is he's signed this contract.
Yeah, I know, and he's a ridiculous talent, and I think what he needs to do whatever you have to. He's a young guy. Try to get yourself into a title situation and look to become the champion, and that way you're getting those big dollars. So I think he's capable of doing it. He's just got to be dedicated.
I'm a huge fan of this guy. I really am. But there's a lot of things he talks about not doing, like also having sex till he's married. That one's weird, man. That one's weird.
All right, some enlightening words from Robin Black to send you into your Thanksgiving weekend for our Canadian viewers. We'll be back next week with more Fight News Now Extra.